Hi, I'm Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. Our mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. You can find out everything there is to know about the VBC on our website, www.veteransbreakfastclub.org. Welcome to VBC's 7th episode of Lioness, the Origin Story. This is a special podcast dedicated to telling the history of Lioness vets from their point of view. And over the course of this series, we have covered everything from Team Lioness to female engagement teams. We're now into the cultural support teams, which we're going to be getting to more stories about that with our special guest today. And our goal really is to shed light on this unexplored history. Joining me, as always, is filmmaker and writer Daria Summers, and usually our Army veteran and original Lioness, Shannon Morgan. She's out sick for this episode, but we're hoping to have Shannon back for the next one to hear more stories from her. In 2008, Daria, along with her filmmaking colleague Meg McLagan, released Lioness, a documentary that revealed the history of a group of women support soldiers who went to Iraq in 2003 as mechanics, clerks, and engineers, but ended up serving as the original Lioness soldiers. Although the Lioness's mission was to defuse tensions with Iraqi women and children, they fought in some of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War. This was prior to the combat exclusion policy being nixed. And if you're joining us here in our 7th episode and have been listening throughout, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. I'm excited for our next special guest in our conversation today. Daria, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much, Sean. Our guest today is retired U.S. Army Warrant Officer and Cultural Support Team Leader, Raquel Patrick. And first, let me say, on behalf of the Veterans Breakfast Club, how thrilled we are to have you, Raquel, on our podcast today, because your accomplishments are truly impressive. To give everyone a few highlights of your amazing career, I'll start by saying you joined the Army in 1990 as an avionics special equipment repairer. By 1993, you were deployed to Somalia as a squad leader with K Company, 159th Aviation. That was followed by duty as a platoon sergeant with A Company, 7 159th Aviation in Germany. In 2002, you were selected to become an electronic systems maintenance warrant officer. After various assignments as a platoon leader within the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, and then as a warrant officer within the 25th Infantry Division headquarters in Hawaii, you served 3 deployments in Iraq from 2005 to 2009. And as if 1 deployment to Somalia and 3 to Iraq wasn't enough, in 2011, you deployed to Afghanistan as a cultural support team leader in the 3rd Special Forces Group. Raquel's post-Afghanistan service is as long as it is impressive. Suffice it to say that in 2018, she retired after 28 years in the Army. Her numerous awards and decorations include the Combat Action Badge, the Army Commendation Medal, a National Defense Ribbon, 2 stars, a Humanitarian Medal, an Iraq Campaign Medal, 4 stars, an Afghanistan Campaign Medal, a NATO Service Medal, and the United Nations Operations in Somalia and the German Armed Forces Badge. And last but not least, the Ordnance Order of the Samuel Sharp Award, a distinction that recognizes the highest standards of integrity, moral character, and outstanding professional competence. Raquel is the mother of 2 children, Ciara, 26, and Louis, 22, and the proud grandmother of 3-year-old Veronica. And she splits her time between Manhattan, where she is today, and Central Florida. Welcome, Raquel. We're so glad to have you here.
Wow, thank
And
you. That was quite the introduction. I'm so humbled and honored to be able to speak to you all today.
So, Raquel, let's jump right in and tell me about where you were, what you were doing when you heard about the Cultural Support Team program, and what intrigued you or motivated you to find out about it and apply.
Where was I? I think I was at that time. I was working at the 3rd Infantry Division division headquarters. I was working in division staff, which kind of takes you away from the soldiers. You're kind of doing staff work and a lot of paperwork and a lot of management, and and it was it's a great job. But when this opportunity presented itself, I was like, this is amazing. This is once in a lifetime opportunity to get to work with special operators, especially since I had been in Somalia, and there were certain times that, like, even though I had been pulling missions, doing guard duty, being commander's driver, they were like, "Oh, you can't go out there because you're a woman. You can't, do combat. Whatever." I don't know. It just really intrigued me, and I liked the idea. I mean, I'm a service person. I mean, that's my calling. I mean, I love the idea of helping people, especially the oppressed. That was my original calling. I was when I joined the army, I was inspired by a stabilization operation. I lived in Panama, 1989, when the U.S. did a stabilization operation, just cause, to remove Manuel Noriega. And I remember watching the soldiers that were like escorting our school buses and things like that. And I was just super inspired. I mean, it was just what I wanted to do. So yeah, so that's what I trained for it. I told my family, and I'm like, this is something really important to me. It's I had a talk with them, and I got their approval and went for it.
So, and what did going for it entail, right? Because you have to apply to get in?
I did have to apply. So when I talked to my supervisors, I was very fortunate. I had really amazing leaders. One of them had been former Rangers and worked with the JSOC, and he's like, he looked at me and he's like, "I think this is a really good fit for you, and I wish you the best of luck." And they signed, and I got my approval paper, my recommendation letters and things like that, to go.
And so then you were going to train. You went to Fort Liberty, which at the time was called Fort Bragg, which is where
Oh yeah,
Special Operations Headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
Talk to me about that process. How
Yes.
long did you train?
Before getting there, I think I had about 3 months to train, and basically I would get up and probably like 3:30 and I would go with, I went to the special operations recruiting station, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, there's this program," and a lot of them, it was really confusing to them because they weren't sure what was going on. But they're like, "Okay, well, you can train with our guys." So I would do relentless amounts of, like, training with them, rucking and carrying sandbags, water bottles, just extra PT. And then I would do my regular PT with my organization, and then I would try to work out after. I was just trying to get as strong as I could, eating as much as I could, to get myself prepared. I think I gained like 25 pounds. I wanted to be really ready and fit, in order to perform at my highest capacity. It was taxing, but it was exhilarating. And then once I got to Fort Bragg, and I met all these amazing women from around, all the different components, and just around the world, really. And they were just top class females. And I was, to a certain extent, I was like, wow, this is my tribe. These are women that were super competitive, but in a really healthy way. Like, we pushed each other, and it was like we were each other's biggest cheerleaders, and we knew that this was important work, and we wanted to make sure we were prepared to do our best.
Were you in with the sort of the very first women who were being trained to be CSTs?
Yes, I was with CST 2, which was the same class that Ashley White was in, which I don't know if you've heard of her whole story. Ashley swore. I was a class leader for most, not all, but most of the time with that class.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so at what point in the training did you receive sort of Afghanistan cultural training or tribal training?
Well, we first did kind of an assessment. We did an assessment. It was like 10 days or so. I don't know, I guess we would call it 100 hours of hell, where we just basically went in, and we weren't allowed to have any caffeine, any supplements, any painkillers, any watches, any sense of time or space. They were just, they gave us like time pacers on our boots, and they would give us different challenges. We would go on rucks. We didn't know the distances. We just had to give it our all. We would have to solve obstacle courses as teams. We'd be put in positions of leadership, and also positions in the team. We didn't have names. We only had numbers. It was really just challenging and hard, but I don't know, worth the determination because we knew that the job we had ahead of us was important.
Right. But did you have any like kind of sit down courses in the culture of
Yes, we did. We
Afghanistan?
had plenty of classes. I mean, aside from the physical stuff, we had plenty of cultural classes. We had language classes. We had marksmanship. We had, I mean, anything you can think of, anything you can encompass that was attributed to supporting special operation forces. We had, and that was over a course of about 3 months or so. After our assessment, we got selected, and then from different components, and then after the assessment process, we went to the training course. And then after the training course, what they did was they separated the females, women, into groups that were either supporting direct action or village stability operations, which I specifically wanted. I actually wrote a letter to the board because I felt, as a mother, I just felt like I have a good connection with children and women, and it was important to me to be able to connect them to their governance and help them support themselves during that time.
And is that what you got?
I did. I got village stability operations. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I mean, it's great that they were so responsive, and you obviously made your case. And so,
Yeah.
how were you selected as a leader, or was that a natural sort of because of the hierarchy?
I'm not sure. I mean, well, the officers are typically the team leads for the CST. We were put in teams of two, usually an NCO and an officer. I was the only warrant officer at the time as part of CST 2. So I was partnered up with Specialist Wu, um, Sergeant Wu at the time. Sure.
Okay. And so then after your training and you're partnered up, what happened? Where did you go? Where were you sent out, and for how long?
So we also got a translator. We went through a couple of translators while we were out there. I was out in the Uruzgan province. Even though we deployed with 3rd Infantry Group, we supported 1st Group, and the SEALs while we were out there, for our DEP group. And we were in the southeast, in very remote spaces.
And what was the name of the province again?
Uruzgan. It was right beside the Helmand. Mm-hmm.
Right. No, I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very curious as to how it works. So you were literally, were you flown out part way? Did you have to hike the rest? Were you helicoptered in?
No, we were so first we went to Bagram, and there we were assigned to our teams. It was a really curious process because we weren't really allowed to connect with them until we got to our forward operating base, which is Tarancot. And then at that point, I reached out to the teams, and they were like, they weren't really. It was a little bit of a jumbled process, because they weren't really sure how to use us or what we were doing. But I tried to make myself and my teammate, as resourceful as possible. We asked what they needed from the forward operating base, and we brought in the mail, some weapon stuff that they needed, and from Tarancot out to and we were helicoptered in the middle of the night. As a matter of fact, when we were helicoptered in, we happened to have some Rangers on the helicopter with us that were returning a person of interest who was blindfolded and handcuffed. I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. And he was released at the same location that we got out. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be a fun process. Let's get into it.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing, which really intrigues me, is that so when you first show up with your special forces counterparts, so were they? How did you identify? How would I understand them? Were they Rangers, just special forces, or was there any specific sort of?
We were attached to an ODA, but we did different missions, but for the most part, we were attached to the ODAs.
What are ODAs?
operational Delta attachments. So um, um, Green Beret teams, I guess. Is what
Okay,
you call them. Mhm.
that helps. That helps any for our listeners or anyone who's not
Okay.
familiar with some of the jargon understand, even if
Right.
it's an approximation. So
Yeah.
in a way, what I hear you saying is that as you arrived there, they were like, okay, not. I mean, they obviously had
We're
some
new.
idea that you were coming.
They had very little
Oh,
notice. We were kind of a new tool to put in their toolbox, and they were halfway through their deployment. So it was a little bit, even though they gave us all this training on how to integrate with the culture and Afghanistan and this and that, they didn't do a great job of telling us how to integrate with the soft teams themselves. So that was a little bit of a challenge. Myself, at that point, I had been in the Army for almost 20 years, so I had been used to working with men at high capacities. But the soft teams were not used to working with women, so the dynamic was a little bit tumultuous at first. We had to get kind of like we had to like make a clear understanding. This is what we're here for. We're here to kind of add value to your team. We kind of had to make a case for ourselves. And we were one part of the attachments. They also get other attachments. They get military dogs, they get civil affairs, they get MISO or PSYOPs. So it was a learning process for both of us to kind of get in there and try to bring some value to the to the mission. And it was successful in several occasions and maybe not so successful in others, depending on your point of view, because it was very new to them. So um, that was challenging, but at the same time, it was still rewarding and fast paced. And you're at the tip of the spear. You're going in. You're doing the missions with these very highly qualified, well-oiled machine men. Going in there,
wow.
and then you're able to speak to the women because they are not able to speak to the women. So now you have more understanding of the information of what's going on, and you can confirm more things for them um, as you're out there doing that. We also pay respect to the culture. We try to wear headscarves and long sleeve shirts and colorful things, and wore makeup and the eyeliner because that's very in tune with their culture, with their superstitions or their beliefs. We try to be very respectful of that in order to integrate more seamlessly.
So that's ironic because it sounds like you specifically brought makeup over there, knowing that you might have to use it as a tool to
Yes.
go out and
Yes.
participate in the culture.
Yes, not only makeup, jewelry, bracelets, things like that. We brought candy and stuff for the kids. We had cookies. We just used every kind of human uh, emotion and kind of winning hearts and minds in order for us to be able to support what was going on out there.
In this instance, then you were literally doing something that the special forces, or you're probably doing something more effectively that the men who were special forces couldn't do.
Yes, I like to say so. Yes.
Was there a point? Was there a point? Like two things. I want you to describe like the first mission you went on where you felt you were actually out on a mission to accomplish something, and then at what point did any light bulbs go off in the minds of the men where they were like, wow, that's useful?
We went on certain missions that were called like ticket and cordon. Well, we would knock, try to and get into these family compounds and speak. We would get the women out and the children, and we would find things, like suicide vests sitting on the kitchen table, and we would ask the women, whose are these, and they would be like, oh, we don't know, we have no idea. And then part of the culture there is kind of like very transactional, and they'll lie to you because they just want to see if you're savvy enough to keep asking questions. So, we use our translator. We had very great translators that would, we were like, hey, we'd ask them a question about 3 or 4 times, and they would confess to things, or we would confirm whether or not certain people were living in the house or not living in the house. And sometimes they would be like, oh, no, no, that person, I don't know who that is, this and that. And then when the SF operators would grab that person, all of a sudden the mother would be like, oh, my child, my son. I'm like, wait a minute. Thought you said you didn't know him. So it was very, a lot of chess playing out there, trying to get to the heart of the situation, and trying to and that was one of, like, probably me and my partner's third mission, where we really had brought some effectiveness in order providing that information.
Well, right. And I would imagine that if in some of these homes, if they had a suicide vest just lying out on a table, they had no idea that cultural support teams were about to come knocking.
Right. No, they didn't. We had good intel on when to. I mean, that's why we went, because we knew something was going on. And then we would do dinners with the local leaders. We would attend key leader engagements. We would sit around, and it was very confusing to them, because they knew we were women, but we also had weapons. We also wore pants. And they were concerned about us bringing our Western ways to them. But, we were there to assure them that that wasn't the case. And we would say things like, we're here to help you raise better men. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Well, maybe we'll allow you to do that. And that would gain us more access to certain places, and certain things. We would work with, like, local dental, find out one dental doctor was actually an arms dealer. We had dinner at
Wow.
his house, and I remember, I'm not a vegetarian, but I really like eating my fruits and vegetables. And I made the mistake of eating a pomegranate one day that was hand opened by one of the guys, and I got really sick for like 3 days. Had to take some antibiotics. Was in the bathroom for quite a few days, and it was a good time. Good times.
Yeah, yeah. And were you in the same sort of one village area, or did you move around?
We moved around. We actually did 3 areas. Um, I'm not sure if I can be very specific where I was at, but it was some very remote areas. We had no running water. We had, outhouses, um, you know, that were like, holes in the ground. They threw lime down, fun stuff. Dishes, out in the open, campfires. We didn't have the support of cooks, and we didn't have normal, like, forward operating base support, so we had to do everything ourselves. Our food was dropped from in pallets. Planes would come by and drop parachutes of food, and we'd go pick it up and support ourselves for a couple of weeks till the next drop. We got very
Okay, and
inventive.
When you say support yourselves, you're referring to yourself, your partner, and the other members of the Special Forces team that you were
Yes.
with, right? Right.
We were in safe houses amongst the villages, so typically there were probably like 25 to 35 people in total in our facility. And we supported ourselves. We did everything ourselves. We cooked for ourselves. We cleaned for ourselves. We did our own field sanitation. We did our own base defense, or house defense. If anything kicked off, if there's any troops in contact, it was us doing it all ourselves.
And did you have any of those moments where your safe house was targeted at all?
Yes, we had. We had a couple of. When in the middle of the night, we would get small arms fire going towards our house, and we would have to activate ourselves. And so when we slept in our cots, everything was within arm's reach. You kind of slept even in the dark. You kind of knew. You kind of had a process. Where everything is at. Our cots were laid up on pallets, and we had little partitions within our tents, separated by walls. And we would have like nails where I would have like my Kevlar, my vest. Everything was, you know, so if I woke up suddenly, I knew where to go and what to do and how to move out. I loved my position because I had the minigun, and that was a great weapon to fire up.
Absolutely. And so in a way, not only were you negotiating the women and children in this new culture, but you're in your safe house where you were all living, you were negotiating a new set of relationships with, as well as the men in the special forces
Yeah.
who probably weren't used to having cultural support teams, all females, living with them in this kind of situation. So everybody was probably negotiating new territory.
It was, yeah, yes. I mean, I was very fortunate and unfortunate. I mean, I had some great guys, but there was some old, mentality. We were very early, and I don't want to speak for everyone. Of course, I'm just talking about my experience. Very early on, and sometimes they're intimidated. Like I was at the time, I was CW3, and I'm dealing with senior NCOs and things like that. So I was just like, hey, I'm not here to undermine your authority or anything like that. I'm here to support you, and so it was. And then of course, me and my teammate, we had to show a united force at all times because if they smelled blood in the water, it was like, it's game on. And it's not personal. It's just the way they treat everyone. So it had nothing to do with me being a female. It had to do with just being part of the team. Make sure you can handle it.
Do you think that's really evidence of a very specific kind of psychology that is in operation among special forces?
Well, it was, yes, I could say that. I can say yes in my experience during that time. Yes, it may have changed. I don't know what it's like now in the military. I know women have made their um, positions, and their standards and their abilities displayed them very honorably and heroically. So I hope that's changed. I was glad to be a part of the first ones to break through that.
No, absolutely. It was like going out to the very front of the furthest, most front lines you could get on in a position like that in Afghanistan, especially for women. What I want to ask you, given that you moved around to different villages, were there any Afghan women who you developed relationships with over the months, or that who you got to know? And if so, what did you pick up? What was their response? What did they think of you? I mean, I'm just trying to understand what that exchange was like.
It was a beautiful process. I mean, I think they were I think we were both fascinated by each other's resilience and strength, of dealing with the circumstances and challenges of living out and dealing with both the austere environment and the mountain ranges that we were at. It was mutual respect. They and I can't speak for them, but they live a different lifestyle. Like it's really hard to put yourself mentally like this is all I know compared to like the, even though there's something to be said about women's rights in America. We're so blessed of the amount of things that we're able to do compared to that culture. But I'm not there to judge them. I'm just there to help them connect with their governance and provide them the support that they could have at the time.
And so I have two questions. One is, what, whether it was one day or a period, what of time, what was your hardest day or your hardest mission? What got diciest?
I think one of the hardest things for me was there was a couple, but one in particular was a young pregnant girl that showed up at our camp during because we had medical support there, and she had a breached pregnancy, and it was not looking good. And there was not much we could do. Um, and we recommended that she go out and go to the nearest hospital. But those were roads that were being blocked by the Taliban. And I knew if she stayed there with us that she probably wouldn't make it, and that would just not be a good look for I don't know. So we, I don't know if it's against our better judgment, but we're like, hey, you need to get to the hospital if you can. Um, and unfortunately, she didn't make it. They tried to go. Taliban, blocked their roads, and the pregnancy delivery didn't go well, and I know that she passed, and that was probably really like it was like one of the heartbreaking moments for me.
That's tragic. How old was she, do you think?
She wasn't. I don't know. She was a teenager, that's for sure, and her husband was, in her, I don't know, probably mid 30s, early 40s. They're tiny. We had a radio station as well, so we tried to put the information out, in order to kind of hey, let them know like, oh, we're here to support you, and this is what the Taliban is doing to you, blocking your roads and causing these things, and anything you guys can tell us or give us information so we can help you um, prevent these kind of things. That was probably one of my hardest missions, hardest days.
Well, I agree. Yeah, that sounds excruciating and tragic because, in a way, if she could have gotten to the hospital,
Yeah.
facility, if she could have been,
we didn't. I mean,
we
had enough stuff to do, but not to deliver a breech. And it looked like an umbilical cord entanglement. So it was not a good day.
And what did you ever come in close contact with the Taliban?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'm actually some of our local police chief were former Taliban. So we would actually try to retrain them. It's just a very cultural, suspicious thing going on over there. There are no schools open. The kids are just running around, feral. We tried to establish an educational program with our translator over the radio station in order for them to get some type of education. 'Cause I'm like, don't you guys want schools and this and that? And and the local leaders would say, yeah, we want this. But it was just a political game. They would say one thing and just do another, and it was a tough mission. It was tough, frustrating. Because you feel like you're spinning your wheels left and right and not really gaining any traction. But I like to think we made a difference a little bit for the time that we were there.
Absolutely. I mean, hearts and minds and the things that were planted there remain in people's memories. There are women there who remember you and what you did. So
the children, especially. There was one young boy. I never forget him. I forget his name. I'm not good with my memory's not that great. But I remember he would be sick every week. Because we always gave him cookies after their treatment.
Oh.
And I'm like, wait a minute, what's wrong with you? He's like, oh, my stomach hurts. And I'm like, are you sure your stomach hurts? He's like, oh, yeah, it hurts really bad. I need medicine. He goes, and am I going to get that cookie? And so I always made sure he got a couple of extra cookies so he would take home to his. And I said, make sure your sister gets some too. So that was always, the children always, brought so much joy to my heart, because children are children, no matter where in the world they're at. They're always the same. They're always curious. They're fascinated by games, and we showed them. I brought National Geographic magazines out there, and I would show them animals from different countries, and they would be like, "Wow, this is amazing! Where is this?" And pictures of the ocean, because Afghanistan is landlocked, so they don't get that. So for me, that probably like some of the most rewarding work I got to do out there.
And what were you able to accomplish in terms of setting up or helping them improve any educational opportunities they had going on?
Well, we did have a radio literacy program, but I don't know how long that stayed up. I mean, it was there for the several months that we were there, so I know that was up. And then sometimes we had groups of kids come in. Like I said, we would host them lunch. We would show them shows, give them food. So just small things like that. We had a lot of medical outreaches, so we would go into the villages, different villages, to kind of get a sense of how many people were there, who was there, who our persons of interest, where they were, and things like that. Provide food. We would inspect local jails. We would train local police. We would work with local commandos as well, to get people of interest. I mean, and then also, and it was hard to trust because these people go back and forth, and they were getting threatened by the Taliban all the time. Like, we see you working with the American soldiers, and they would get letters stapled to their barns, and so it was a difficult process, but in different areas we provided different support. So. Um, at least while we were there. And then we had future CSTs go in there and do the same things, so we were able to provide patches of assistance while we were there.
What is there anything in terms of, I mean, I feel like, more and more of the public understands to some extent what a cultural support team is, and what they function at, how they function. But is there anything that specifically, like a misconception or something you would like people to know about the special aspect of your work over there? Like, what question am I not asking?
I don't know what question you're asking. I mean, what do you want to know? I mean, you asked me. I mean, there's a lot of question of like, oh, are females able to handle that kind of thing? Yeah. I mean, absolutely, but it takes a toll, like any other type of job that you see the dark side of humanity, and that's true with first responders, firefighter, policemen. Even though it's work that you want to tell yourself you can handle and you can do, and at the time you can do all of those things, but you carry it home with you, and it's really difficult to sometimes to process that trauma, and that's probably the hardest thing that we had to deal with. And then once we were back, and then myself and some other veterans, I know they're having a hard time. They're getting denied their medical disabilities because they're like, what? You guys weren't out there. You guys weren't doing that. Because at first it was kind of, clandestine. We weren't really supposed to be out there. So it's not really fully detailed in our records. So that's been probably like the biggest heartache. And it's not that we want accolades or anything like that. We don't. I really don't. And it's really difficult. I'm a very private person. So for me to speak to this publicly, it's really about getting the message out there that, hey, I don't need the applause or anything, but I do want the acknowledgement, like I worked really hard. I sacrificed a lot of things. Not just myself, all of the females that were out there and the men, and it's just, to be acknowledged by our government and given the right support and medical things that we need. That's probably my biggest reason to going on any show, and speaking publicly, about these things, because they're hard. They do take a toll on you. I had a it cost me my marriage, quite frankly, because I had a lot of trauma upon my return, and it was really hard on my kids. I love them and they're very resilient, but I'm not, I'm not ashamed to say that I had tough days and it was hard on them, and I know it, they had tough days dealing with me, and they probably still do. But and I love them so much, and I'm so humbled and honored to be their mom, and and I just want them to know I'm working really hard to get myself right.
I understand that, and I thank you for sharing that, and that you make a very important point, and I just want to applaud you for saying that, because it is so important that veterans, women veterans, and all veterans and people in those positions understand that the war doesn't end when you leave it, or those situations don't end when you remove yourself from them physically. You carry them inside you. So, but
Yeah.
it does, what you were just describing does make me think, because when my colleague and I made the film Lioness, really about the women from 2003, 2004, who were among the very, very first to be used in a capacity outside what they were sent there for and put in these unexpected situations, which basically defied the combat exclusion policy. So what's interesting
And I
to
applaud
me,
those women because they did it with very little training. I mean, we had a lot of formal training before going out there. So the Lioness program, my hats off to them. You know, that had to be really tough as well.
yes, and well, the reason I mention it, Raquel, is because some of the things that, like after we made the film, with some of the women went up to Capitol Hill and gave some testimony as to their experiences, and one of their main issues was really echoed exactly what you said, which was, yes, we don't want bright lights, this, that, or the other thing, but we can't get the sort of the recognition on our paperwork, the recognition so that we can get the benefits, whether it's from the VA, that, we really need to heal ourselves, to move on.
Right.
And
Oh, the men get it approved, no questions asked, but when it comes to us, they're like, well, you weren't that important. And that hurts, that hurts to the core.
absolutely. I can't even imagine hearing that.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
a slap in the face. You feel abandoned, and that's, I mean, I've had, and a lot of us dealt with it kind of blindly when we got back, because we went back and we didn't go back in our normal decompression. We got back and they're like, okay, go back to your organizations. Good luck. And I think after a couple of years, we ended up doing a lot of reunions and get-togethers, and we're able to we sought treatment on our own, paid out of pocket, do yoga, medicinal plants. I did fascial release. I've done all kinds of things to heal my body and my mind. And it's an uphill battle, but we're all getting through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as is often the case with women, you have to form your own networks of support.
Yes.
It is interesting to me because you returned from Afghanistan in 2011 or 2012?
2012. Yeah.
2012. So, because one of the things that I found fascinating and was actually in part motivation to do this podcast was, when I had the opportunity, was because, so starting with the Lioness in 2003, through really you're returning in 2012 after everything that the Lioness teams did with the Army, with the Marines, that the female engagement teams did, that the cultural support teams did. You did it all while the policy hung over that you were kind of not supposed to be doing this.
Right.
Technically, you were probably violating the policy, and you couldn't be attached. You couldn't be assigned. You could only be attached or in support of.
Right.
And so it put. I think what people have to come to understand is that for like 10 years, women operated in both theaters in this very gray zone. And which actually made it very difficult to come back and get recognized and the services that you needed from the VA.
Right.
Does that track with experiences?
Yes, it does. That's true. And then when I came back, I went back to 3rd Infantry Division, and I helped myself and some other former CSTs. We kind of presented to the division, because they wanted to have FET teams for their upcoming deployments, and we helped kind of put up a training program for them. And I think we called them Valkyries. So when I left Fort Stewart and I went to 25th Infantry Division, I helped set up that training program.
There was one quote that I heard from a CST member, I think This was from, after she had returned, and I was just wondering if you had a take on this. She said, so she served as a CST member. Most women are reluctant to identify with their military experience because people don't validate their contributions.
That's true. That's true. I mean, that's not true in all cases, but but it's there. It's just a little stigma that sometimes you don't even want to talk about it because then they're like,
Right.
well, yeah, whatever. You guys are just there. You guys are just accessories or shows or whatever, like MWR support. And it's like, that hurts my feelings because that's not, I trained really hard. I worked really hard. We all did. So that's not a fair analogy, but it's not true 100% of the time. But when it does happen, it's just disappointing, to say the least.
But sometimes these things have to just happen enough times, not all the time, just enough of the time, so that
you just like forget it. I don't want to talk about it. It's like 1,000 paper cuts. They just say things that just kind of hurt you, and you're just like, never mind. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
So, tell us what have you been up to since you retired?
Well, that's been fun. So when I retired, I took a few months off, just did nothing. Just kind of was a little couch potato. Unfortunately, like I drowned my sorrows in beer and pork rinds or something like that. And then I was like, okay, that's enough. I gotta get moving, or I'm just gonna die here. So I started working again. I was a contractor for the government. I was doing curriculum management, and training support, like POIs and things like that for the Warrant Officer Career College. Did that for about 3 years, and then I was done with that, and now I freelance. I'm a consultant with a wonderful company, Tomahawk Security Solutions. They're former Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, law enforcement, and we go around the country kind of teaching situational awareness, to interactive threat seminars, active shooter threat scenarios, to help train local law enforcement, EMTs, fire departments, things like that. It's very rewarding. It's things that come second nature to us, and we're able to go around and just kind of show people how to be safe. As a mother and a grandmother, it gives me great honor and pleasure to be able to help keep as many people safe as I can. And doing this work really gives me a sense of giving back. And it's a great company, great leaders, great instructors. I definitely enjoy doing that. And I'm trying to get also involved in local community here. I do the mission. I just started with the Mission Continues. And they're kind of trying to talk to me into getting into some political stuff. But I'm not sure I'm ready for that 100%. But I have to give it some thought, because it's important for people to, if you're capable and you have something to say, it's important for us to, still have a voice and get out there and get in front of people and, and tell people what's going on, and help and fight for people's rights, veterans' rights, not just females, all veterans. The VA system is broken. Not in all places, but in many places it's really difficult to get help, especially mental health. I'm very lucky that even though I struggle with a brain injury and some other mental health disorders, I have it within me to still push through. But I have a great feeling for people that don't have as much, and it's a struggle. Getting to the VA system is a struggle. I still use TRICARE, and things like that, but but you have to go through the VA in order to get your disabilities, approved and recognized. But it's really hard. And I just want, if anything, I want the audience to know that. Yeah.
That's very important, and I'm really glad you stated that so articulately, because that's always an important problem. And it's just unfortunate that sometimes to get support for mental health is the greatest struggle, because that's actually when you need that mental health support, it's often the times when that struggle is going to be the hardest.
Yeah.
So
no, and I don't think that's just true for veterans. I think it's just a problem nationwide with healthcare, getting mental health support. We went through a lot with COVID, and people are really pushing through. I have a lot of hope, but it's really difficult for everyone, just to kind of get mental health, and it shouldn't be a stigma anymore. A lot of people want to say, oh, I don't need that, I don't need therapy and things like that, but it's really important, and it's okay, and it's okay. It's okay. The strongest people out there have a lot of internal turmoil, and it's okay to go get help. I'm here to tell you it's helped me quite a bit.
I just want to jump in and just say, in my time with the Veterans Breakfast Club, the amount of time I've spent talking with veterans, and the thing that I find always so amazing is this passion for service. And I just want to applaud you for a couple of reasons. One being, despite all of the hardships, that you still have this passion for service. It's so commendable. It's so inspiring to me. But I also want to thank you to say, like, I know that in talking with veterans, because I'm not a veteran myself, but in talking with veterans over the last several years, I know that climbing this mountain is not an easy thing to do. You mentioned it before we started recording that it's needed, but I know that that's not easy, and I want to thank you for doing that and to climb that mountain with us here on the podcast today.
And I want to thank you for giving us the platform and the voice to be able to do it. I mean, I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Can you speak to the Raquel that decided to enlist, and what your expectations were for your career, and how that sort of shifted over the course of your time in the military, and what your sort of, why you stayed in?
Sure. I grew up in Central America. I grew up in Panama. My dad was in the military, and I went to DoD schools. So I've always been kind of, had knowledge of the military. It wasn't really in my original dreams to join the military. I wanted to be a marine biologist, like every other kid in the late '80s, early '90s. And then we had a stabilization operation that took place in 1989, Operation Just Cause, to remove the Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega. And during that time, our family lived off base, and we got moved on the base, and we were in the middle of a war-torn country, and we had to get like military escorts on our school buses to go to school and things like that. And I remember just being fascinated by the young military police women that came on there. They looked so like confident and sure of themselves, and I was just like, wow, that's really amazing. And they were not, and I was 17. I graduated when I was 17, and they were not much older than me. They were like 18 or 19. And I was like, wow, you know what? I think that's what I want to do. And I graduated early, but my parents did not want to sign off on me joining the military right away. They're like, are you sure? We want you to think about this. So, but I was determined. I was headstrong. I was like, nope, I'm still doing it. So as soon as I turned 18, I went ahead. Recruiter, he had an easy job. Yeah, I was going to sign up regardless. So that was my original inspiration. I ended up going to Germany. That was my first duty assignment. I was at the end of the Cold War. So I don't know. I really enjoyed it. It was a challenge, but at the same time, it was just in my blood. I think I had that warrior spirit. And I wasn't sure I was going to make a career out of it, but the more I did it, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. Kind of my love and hate living in the city. It's a struggle, but you kind of like, like it makes you feel alive. Like, okay, we can do this, and I just kind of kept doing it. Even I had my kids while I was in, and then I was fortunate enough to have a really diverse career. Started out avionics. I ended up, becoming a warrant officer. We lived in Hawaii, we lived in Germany, we lived in Savannah, Georgia. I got to live all over Georgia, actually. I concluded my career in Fort Rucker. I was teaching. Both. I was a TAC officer instructor, so I taught new TAC officers. So yeah. So, and at the time, and then when I retired, I retired at 28. I think at that time my body was just falling apart, so I couldn't serve in the capacity, full capacity that I wanted to. So I was like, all right, my time here is done, and that's why I ended up retiring.
After being dropped into Special Forces Safehouse in southern Afghanistan for 8 months, what did you learn about teamwork?
Okay, so one of the most important lessons that I learned as a CST was to utilize tools of self-improvement. As a leader, not only a leader, I use this actually as a mother, sister, partner, things like that. And we do it naturally. We don't even realize it. It's something that I teach actually now, as a civilian, to people to keep them safe. And it's using like the OODA loop, is the one thing you can't change in your life is the circumstances that you're in. But, how do you navigate that, successfully? Is you want to observe what's going on in your space, want to orient yourself and make a decision and act on it, right? And see what happens. And then you continuously do that, over and over in order to, to either improve the situation or come to a conclusion or, meet your mission. Anything really, what can you bring to the table, the game, the party, etc. It enables you to build a better understanding of yourself, build better teams, companies, families, anything. And that's pretty much like my words of wisdom or the advice that I like to put out to the audience. Just kind of, be more situationally aware of where you are in a situation or circumstance and what you can do to make things happen.
Do you find that you apply that in your own life every day?
I do. I apply it all the time. I apply it with myself and my family, my work, my business, just everyday thing. You do it naturally, think about it. Even if you go to a class, you show up, kind of take a look around the room and decide where you want to sit, see if your friends are around or things like that, just everything. If you go to a restaurant, where do you want to be? Just kind of take a look around and see what's going on. Where are the exits? Just take one moment. Live your life freely. But also be aware and know what's happening, so you can keep yourself safe and and happy.
And is that also something you would use to kind of navigate through situations where there are differences of opinion that you have to reconcile?
Absolutely. So one of the things, I'm a very passionate person, and passion often gets labeled as emotional, emotions and logic, kind of the biggest differences between men and women, is a tricky thing to navigate. And, if you take the time to self-assess, be honest with yourself, what are you doing? And, and what can you do to make things better? I think that's really important.
That certainly resonates with me. Being like an actor, artist background, I'm certainly more passionate for the most part than I am logical.
Yeah.
And that gets labeled as emotional, but it's really just like, you get really passionate about something. It's just,
Yeah, and emotions, are usually, looked down upon, but you feel what you feel in life, and that's part of being human, and that's what makes it beautiful. And but it's important to, to do all these things in order to make the world a better place.
A high sort of emotional IQ or intuitive IQ is really valuable in a range of situations. So I totally hear what you're saying. I really appreciate that perspective. So thank you for sharing that with us. Well, I think that might be a good way to conclude our time together, which is, you've generously given us so much of your time. Thank you, Raquel.
You're very welcome.
And,
thank you.
This has been amazing, and it's so important that women come up, and thanks to Sean and Todd at the Veterans Breakfast Club for providing the space for women to come and tell their stories. And that's what we're doing, and that's what you've done. And we thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure.
And to our audience, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube. Contact us at VBC if you have any thoughts or comments about the Lioness, the Origin Story podcast. You can contact me at Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. We have a couple more episodes of Lioness podcast planned, so look forward to more, and hopefully Shannon will be back joining us in the next episode. Daria, any final words before we sign off?
No, I'm just, I can't stop thinking about what I've just, what the stories and the experiences Raquel has just told us. I'm going to sit with this one for a while. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good week.
Thank you very much. Much love to you. Bye.
Bye.